IBM Cloud. He is also an expert on curriculum design and part of many academic councils, board of studies at various academic bodies, universities, including AICTE, NITR, and many more. He is associated with few universities as adjacent faculty, research co-guide, and mentor to student projects. We welcome you, sir. Now, I request Dr. Mani Madhukar to enlighten us. Over to you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am, and thanks for this generous introduction. And good morning, everyone. I hope you are having a great 5 days, 6 days of
Dr.
learning
Mani?
experience. Yeah, are you able to hear me? Are you able to hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, audible. Audible, sir, audible.
Okay, great. So let me start presenting, guys, and I hope my slides are visible to you now.
In a better place.
Okay. So
The sunset to happen. Yeah,
so,
it was
so before we go further, right, let's try and understand why do we need to understand it all about consultancy, right? And what are the various things that one has to actually take care of before one gets into the business of consultancy? And then we'll also talk about the various avenues which are available for consultancy, particularly from an Asia Pacific point of view. So I'm going to cover that broadly. But I would suggest that you take a snapshot of this slide, because I'll come back to this slide and I will talk to you about these links which are mentioned towards the left hand side corner. So I'll come to that point later, that what these links are and how people in academia, how researchers, how faculty members can leverage that. So this is one point I'll talk to you about. Let me go ahead and let me talk about the core agenda today. Okay. Now, can somebody mute
Dear
themselves?
participants, mute yourself. Dear participants, please everyone mute yourself.
Okay, thank you. So let's try and understand, right? And this is actually a very humorous one, that what is consulting all about? So, and on a lighter note, right? So, and we often give, right, on a daily basis, we give so many consultancy to so many people. At times it is warranted, at times it is not warranted. People ask, and we even give it without people asking for it, right? So consultancy is something which is very common, that we actually give to one and all, right? Whether they are asking for it or not. But typically, what a consultancy is like, right? Let's try and try to understand from a humorous way, right? So it's basically, somebody wants to actually get a haircut, and you have a consultant whether he should be going for a haircut or not. So if you go directly to a barber for a haircut, it typically might ask you for a 50 rupees or maybe something like that, right? Now, but if you go to a consultant, what the consultant will try to explain to you is, look, your hair are gonna have some X rupees of oil, right, in the cycle. Then you are gonna wash your hair with some Y rupees of shampoo in maybe a month or two, right? And then you need a mirror, a comb, and you need something else together on that. And on top of that, you need to pay me for my consultancy advice, let's say 500, right? So instead of all of that, you better go and get a tonsure head, right? You better get a head, shaven up altogether. So for that 20 rupees of getting a head shaved, the consultant basically charges almost like 500 plus just for the consultancy of it, right? And the immediate problem could have been solved by just paying 50 rupees to the barber. So that's what is majorly what on a humorous note is consultancy all about, is how do we put the facts in a manner that they can reduce the pain point of the actual customer or the client that you would have, right? Okay. So consultancy mainly talks about service. It's in one or the other way, right? So it can be either a proactive advice, it can be a personalized approach of giving somebody a particular service, it can be a service associated with a product, or it can be like a preventive service as well, right? Like somebody, providing a consultancy for a preventive mechanism, preventive maintenance. Typically, consultancy services are advisory in nature, right? So, yeah, as I said earlier, right, we keep giving advice to one and all that we meet in our daily lives as well, right? But in common, when we talk about from on a serious note, right? Consultancy is more associated with a skill of studying a problem, designing a solution, and then organizing the milestones of the person for whom you are doing it. Organizing his milestones together, and then advising the client in so many ways, by either conducting some training or maybe doing some knowledge transfer, or maybe making some project for them. One of these ways will definitely be a reason to that, right? So typically consultancy is more about giving a service to somebody, right? And this service can be either in a form of a content. Maybe you can create a PPT for somebody and you can give it to him. That's also a consultancy, right? Or you can actually, for let's say, you have all these events that you conduct, examinations, online examinations, right? Now, what you can always come back and say is, look, this is not the right approach wherein a particular student writes the examination and uploads the scanned copy of it. There can be a better way of doing this, and then you tell the process, right? So that is the process. So consultancy can be one, and maybe a series of such tasks which basically can create a process or update a process, or evolve a process completely in a new way, right? By the way, let me explain this. Consultancy is not about doing things yourself or being responsible for doing yourself, right? It's all about helping others. And so consultants are normally the agents of change. We call them as agents of change. Why?
Manish sir,
Yeah.
sir, kindly pin on your presentation. I think it is not visible to participants. Kindly.
Is the presentation not visible? Can somebody put it on chat?
No, sir, your presentation is not visible, sir. Look at this side.
Okay, let me stop sharing and again share. Just a moment.
Okay, sir.
So the screen was not at all visible from start, is it?
Now it is visible, sir.
No, it was not visible from start, ma'am.
Yeah, sir, it was not visible from starting, sir. Actually, it was shown on the YouTube only, but in Google Meet, it was not shown.
Is it coming now for you?
Yeah, it is now visible to everyone.
Okay, great. So, okay, maybe. So let me, try to put my point in again a perspective. So this is what actually I was talking to you about when I was, sort of elaborating that example of a barber, and I was giving, explaining what the consultancy is all about, right? So this, though a very, on a lighter note, but then, it basically evokes a certain thought process, right? What a consultancy is majorly into, okay? This is where I was actually explaining to you about the various ways, right? Whether it's preventive consultancy, or it's a proactive sort of a consultancy, or it's a product expertise and all, right? And this is what I was actually talking to you about. Consultants are typically agents of change. Okay, we call them as agents of change because they are the ones which basically suggest some process change or some mechanism using which the client uh, has a problem, has a pain point which are going to solve. So that's typically is a consultancy more into, right? Uh, and as a consultant, what you are actually responsible is about creating a roadmap, not executing a roadmap, right? So and you do not have a direct, because you're not executing it, so you do not have a direct control over the implementation piece as well. So we need to know, we need to be very clear about what part is consultancy, and where do we leave it there, right? So you can only handhold to a certain limit, right? For example, when you teach a class, you only teach a subject, you don't teach a paper there, right? And based upon what you have taught as a subject, the student is supposed to appear or write his exam based upon what you have taught, because you've taught a subject, not a paper, right? Same is here. The consultant is basically not responsible for doing the job himself, but then he actually creates a blueprint of how the job should be executed, what should be the various things should be taken care of, and all those. So we'll talk about that today in due course, right? Since you are all from academic fraternity, right? So one thing that you regularly do is a lot of research, right? And let's try and understand how research and consultancy maps to each other, right? Um, so research is all about, when you are trying to do, trying to break from a regular way of doing things. You're creating something new, right? You're trying to create something which does not exist, right? So research is mostly driven by your curiosity to create something different, something new, right? Whereas consultancy is typically for a pain point of the client, and hence it is a client driven thing, right? And it normally utilizes existing applications or existing tools which are available in the market. Consultancy has specific outcomes, specific deliverables, and these deliverables have to be utilized by someone, right? Which is unlike the research, where the outcome may not be, utilized by someone. It may be a tangible outcome in research, but then it may not be relevant to the people in that area. For example, if someone of you is doing a research in image analytics, right? So whatever you come up with as a new algorithm for doing a image analytics, you may be actually creating a new algorithm, no doubt about that, but then that algorithm may not be utilized by anyone, right? Because that's just an outcome of a research. But then if you're doing a consultancy and you're working on a similar set of problem, then that outcome is something which will be utilized by some client, utilized by some practitioner, right? So that's what is one major difference, right? Number one. Number two, consultancy needs to have some recommendations on which actions can be taken upon, right? Compared to that, research is more about doing some peer review, doing some getting some SMEs who would actually review the paper or review the research work and tell about the novelty of that, right? So that is again a stark contrast to what research is and what consultancy is, right? Research may have some cost or may not have some cost, but then consultancy definitely has a consultant's rate for that matter. That's one. Number two, research may have or may not have financial rewards. You may have some patents coming out of it. You may have some, IP coming out of it. You may have some awesome research papers, which are outcome of your research work. But then from a consultancy's point of view, the entire work of consultancy is done from a financial rewards point of view, right? So what you do leads to some amount of financial rewards. That's what consultancy is all about, right? Again, coming to the same point I was talking earlier, the IP that you create out of research is of use only for university or academic literature mostly, right? Unless you are doing an industry sponsored research, in which the outcome is taken by industry and basically converted into some sort of a product, right? For example, somebody who has created a new circuit, right, for some X thing, and some company buys that circuit design and actually converts it into a physical board. That's very less a case, very small fragment there, right? But compared to that, consultancy is always client driven. So whatever your IP is, the beneficiary is usually the client, right? Because that's what he has paid for. That's what he has paid you the consultancy for, right? And okay, one more important point to note here is whatever work you do as a part of consultancy may not be published because it is the IP of the client. Since it is the IP of the client, then you may not be the beneficiary of claiming that. Okay, compared to that, when you actually talk about research, you are free to publish anything whatever you write, right? You can even publish a literature review in which you can quote from what people have been doing in the similar area, right? So research is normally replicable. You can replicate whatever people have done, or whatever you have done, people can quote and replicate. Consultancy is non-replicable. You are bound by the legislation, you are bound by the clauses where you cannot share whatever you have done for a particular, client. So, and you cannot replicate that, right? So let's say if I have solved a problem X for a client A, I cannot take the same solution X for a client B, because that solution is, copyright to client A only, right? So that's something we really need to really understand, right? Now, what typically constitutes of a consultancy activity? Now, this is just a few of these, and there can be this can be so much more. This list can be so much more elaborate and exhaustive, right? So this is just a few pointers around. Now, I'm sure most of you who have been into academia, who have been into research, and who have some numbers of years of experience, who are senior in the field, may had some amount of consultancies already given, right? So if you see that, broadly we say problem solving for a client is something called as consultancy. Now this problem solving is a very broad umbrella. It's a very big, it's a term, general term, generic term, under which there can be n number of things, right? This problem solving can be a process related, it can be a something, and a management service related, it can be basically drafting a policy, it can be doing some supervision for particular activity, it can be anything for that matter, right? So this is just a indicative list about, right, what all consultancy services can be construed as activities. So it can be a technical due diligence that you undertake before taking up a project, whether the project is feasible or not, whether you can do it or not, whether it makes sense doing it or not, whether it's feasible cost versus amount of effort which has to be put into it. That's one piece. Even a literature review is basically a consultancy work, right? So all that you do before you actually get to start with your research is actually part of, so that's where you really start with the consultancy, right? So you do a lot of research in terms of understanding who has done what in the field before you actually propose what you want to do as an add-on or as a novelty of your research work, right? So that is again a part of consultancy, right? When you evaluate a certain thing, right, maybe a program or a process or anything, that again is a part of a consultancy activity. All the trainings that you do, right, it majorly client facing, we're not talking about internal trainings here, those are again a part of your consultancy activity. Again, all those design services that you undertake either from an engineering point of view or from an architecture point of view, they again constitute to be a consultancy activity, right? So this is just an indicative list, as I was telling you, and not an exhaustive one, right? So this is a survey which I've picked up from ITC, which got published in the Global Business Consultancy Services market space, and this basically talks about how, particularly in Asia Pacific region, what are the business priorities, right, for business consulting, and how do these providers actually perform. Now, if you see this infographic which is available, this basically talks about a grid which talks about what are the performance for a consulting firm from lower to higher compared to the business priority. It's basically a mapping of business priority to the performance of the firms, right? So if you see there, there are different quadrants there, right? And each quadrant talks about one different arena, right? So right from focusing on customer experience, to create a talent performance or a talent retention, or expanding into new geographies, or improving internal operations, improving internal processes, digitizing the product, digitizing the services, and transforming the business critical processes, trying to make the company agile. Everything is basically across in this infographic that you see, right? The idea is to give a insight about how do you become more customer centric, right? What are the various factors that you really need to include on when you actually trying to understand your business priorities, particularly from a consulting point of view, right? So right from becoming more agile to driving innovation, and hence increasing productivity, thereby improving the customer satisfaction and making the business more effective. These are the 5 key things that we are deriving out of all of this that you see over there, right? And it's all interconnected, right? So right from, again, I'll repeat it, right from becoming more agile to driving innovation and improving internal operations, hence improving the productivity and thereby improving business effectiveness and ultimately improving the customer experience. So that's what typically is a priority when you talk about consultancy. Now, this is the entire journey of a consultant, right? Now, how? Let me explain that to you. Let's say, if somebody of you who is part of chemical engineering or instrumentation engineering or maybe mechanical engineering, let's say, a particular process plant has roped you as a consultant, right? Now, what do they do? How do you actually help them? So what is typically a process plant, right? So a process plant is something like, let's see this, you all see this polythene, right? There is a plant to manufacture these sheets, okay? And these sheets are actually manufactured in a regular, so there are silica, so there are silos in which there is silica chips, then there are other silos where there are other raw material. All these silos actually blow these raw material like silica chips and all these into a furnace. Okay, the furnace has a lot of sensors, and those furnace basically melts and fuses all those components together at a certain temperature, at a certain cooling, and then it passes through this particular molten silica is basically passed through various rollers, some big, some small, some cold, some warm, at different temperatures, right? The idea is the sheet that pass through these rollers should actually be smooth, and it should be holes free, means there should be no bubbles there. If there is a bubble in a sheet, that means there is a problem in one of these parameters, and there are hundreds of parameters, by the way, right? Even if one parameter goes wrong, the entire production comes to a standstill. Either the quality will suffer, or the sheet which you are manufacturing will not be bought by the market because of the problems in that, defects in that, and so on and so forth. So let's say a particular process company has hired you as a consultant, right? Now, what do you do? How do you get it started? I'm trying to give you a view of this infograph that you see over here, right? So number first is you basically identify the critical processes in the plant, right? Once you have identified the critical processes, you try to adopt or you try to change those processes so that they are more agile, okay? And while you are doing that, you need to manage the risks associated with transforming those processes. And how you do it? You basically do it through innovative, making it some innovations around, improving some internal operations, right? Identifying what are the options where you can make some changes and you can improve the quality, right? And at the same time, you would like to digitize the entire product and service lane, right? So once you're able to do this, what you do is you basically increase the productivity. That's one thing. Two, you reduce the costs, and you actually improve the overall talent performance. So company will have so many people who are working on this process, right? Once you are able to give them the new process, that will really improve the not just the performance of the plant, but then also the people who are working, because you have given them a new way to do things which they were not familiar earlier, right? And this overall leads to something called as operational efficiency. So let's say the output of the plant was, let's say, 10 metric ton in maybe one shift, right? After what you do, the tweaks, maybe it may actually increase to 12 metric tons or maybe 15 metric tons per shift. And hence this better quality product is going to actually improve the customer experience and create a more effective business, right? So if I have to take you through the entire infograph that you see here, that's typically what it actually means to. So this is what I was just talking to you about, how the overall process from a consulting point of view increases efficiency, effectiveness, customer experience, and of course the mandatory regulatory compliance. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna take a pause here. Are there any questions so far about what we talked? Ma'am, in case there are any questions on the chat, because I can't see the chat, you can maybe tell me about those.
Respected sir, we will take the queries in the end of the session, sir.
Okay, fine. That's okay. Okay, so this is what I was trying to explain this, right, from a Asia Pacific point of view and all, right? So let's try to dig into the areas where there is a lot of business opportunities, right? And what is the current avenues, particularly from a consultancy point of view? And the entire focus today that I'm sort of talk about is from two markets. One is India, South Asia, and ASEAN, right? Because this is major geography that typically we cater to. So if you see the avenues of consultancy, right, digitization is number one priority with analytics and cloud. Why? Because these are the reasons, which are driving the market disruptions. If you see the companies around you, folks, in last 5 years or last 8 years, there has been a tremendous change in the type of businesses that you would have seen around you, right? So you have seen Olas and Ubers coming, right, which was not there earlier. Taxis had been there for ages, right? But Olas and Ubers have really changed the way taxis have been operating. Transportation has been, being done. Similarly, the likes of Flipkart, Alibaba, Facebook, Amazon, they have changed the overall scenario of market. We never used to shop like this the way we are shopping today. 10 years back, we used to go to these offline stores, right? These markets, shops, physical shops, and we used to buy it from there. And before making that purchase, we used to actually go to multiple shops for the same product, right? We used to do a comparison maybe at times, and then do a shopping. This is entirely changed, right? Earlier, if you used to buy 5 things in maybe one quarter, today you are buying 50 things in a quarter, which has entirely changed the market dynamics, right? Today you don't have to go anywhere, right? You can compare so-called comparison of multiple online stores like Amazon, Flipkart, Alibaba, and so many more, right? So businesses have changed drastically, and what has changed business drastically is the technologies underneath, right? Had these technologies not been there, the businesses may not have evolved the way they have. I'll give you one more example, which is pretty recent, maybe for you to, you know. So, for example, in 2020, let's say you bought a policy for your vehicle, a car or a motorcycle, sometime in January 2020, right? So, an insurance policy you bought. Now, see, you might have, paid some 5,000, 8,000, whatever, cost for your insurance policy. But then from March and maybe till around like October, because of this lockdown and other restrictions, you were not able to drive your vehicle on the road. So when the vehicle is not on the road, what's the point of having an insurance for the vehicle, right? There is no point actually. It's a waste of money. So that means when you paid the policy premium, you paid the premium for 12 months, whereas your car is or your motorcycle is on the road only maybe for 4 months. So that means you paid for 8 months for no reason. Now, you know what? There are a couple of insurance providers who have recently launched that you can even buy a policy for a day. You can even buy an insurance policy for a week. You can even buy an insurance policy for a month, right? Depending upon how much do you anticipate that you would be using your vehicle. Or you can even buy a dynamic policy. So the moment let's say yesterday the lockdown got lifted, let's say for example, and today I'm planning to travel to some place, maybe let's say Delhi, or maybe Missouri or Nainital or someplace, right? So the moment I bring my car out of the garage, I can actually get a dynamic insurance policy issued at the very instant, and I can get the policy only for the number of days I'm planning to drive. So let's say I'm planning a trip for 5 days, right? And once I am back from Missouri, I'll not be going anywhere. Again, my car will stay in the garage because I'm traveling out of the country for like 2 months. So why should I be paying all that money for a year or so? I'll simply take a policy for those 5 days and that's it, right? So this is what is called disruption, right? And why is this disruption happened? Disruption has happened because of various technologies like digitization, analytics, cloud, blockchain, virtual reality, and so many more, right? Even IoT, right? So that's what 60% of the overall opportunities that you see are basically driven by digital and cloud and analytics and all, right? And these are the priority areas for most of the CIOs. So when you're talking about or you're thinking about a consultancy, you need to understand or you need to identify how you can make an impact to the business of the other person. So coming back to the previous example of that process plant for polythenes, right? Based upon your knowledge, based upon your understanding, based upon the depth of the skills that you have, you are proposing the plant owner what can be the new way of doing things, the agility, the changes of process, so that the performance also improves, the quality of the also improves, and at the same time the process is much more customer oriented, right? The outcome or the quality is much more leads to customer satisfaction, right? So that's what you need to identify what are the avenues of consultancy, what are the things that people are looking for in towards changes, and what are the market factors that are driving these changes, right? So in a year or two, what say if you see this infograph here, this slide here, you will see there would be a lot of RPA, remote process automation, right? And this will actually be enhanced by AI. You know what? There are coming in coming times. What you will see, you'll see a self-healing code. So the many a time you might have seen, a particular application on a mobile phone or your laptop actually gets corrupt and gets closed, right? Because of some issue has come up, and then you might have to uninstall it and reinstall it, right? How about the code is self-healing? Self-healing. What it means is the moment you have a problem and the application is closing itself because of some error, at the back end, without your knowledge, the application heals itself from some process written in the code and then restart itself without any problem the next instance, right? That's one way of actually thinking out of the box, right? And this is something which is coming up. Similarly, blockchain and process automation using AI is going to change a big time. For those of you who are coming from a background of machine learning or AI or something like that, let me give you another example here. So whenever you actually start doing a machine learning based research, the first thing that you try to identify is a problem, right? The second thing that you are trying to identify is a data set about on that problem, right? Third, when you have both the data and you have the problem, the thing is which algorithm will be the best fit for this type of data, right? And then you try to use various algorithms for that data set to try and see, it's like a hit and try, right? That which algorithm is going to give you a more optimum performance, accuracy, all those metrics. Now try to see all. So if one algorithm takes almost like 1 day or 2 days to explore, if you're trying to do 20 algorithms, means 40-50 days gone in this process only. Now there is a process, there is a tool called Auto AI, right? This Auto AI actually runs all the possible algorithms, almost like 50-60 plus regression based algorithms on your data set, and within 5 minutes it comes back and tell, look, these are the 7 algorithms which are more suited for your data set, right? And not only that, it also tells you what is the various accuracy levels it has achieved at those levels. Now see, this is again one area which is evolved, right, because of inclusion of AI, which was not there, which was never there, right? So we need to understand the pain points of the client, and you need to be thorough with what are you going to propose to him, right? So coming back again to the avenues available in ASEAN and I say ISA is India South Asia, right? So from India South Asia perspective, cloud, cognitive analytics, machine learning, blockchain, these are one of the few of the areas which are really seeing a lot of traction. From an ASEAN point of view, Industry 4.0 is really hot because most of the governments today have acknowledged and adopted Industry 4.0, and IoT being an integral part of it. So IoT definitely has a major impact and overall scheme of things. Now, if you see here, this is basically some information about what are the focus areas, because you need to identify the focus area of your client, right? As I said earlier, right, CIOs in Southeast Asia are basically leveraging business intelligence, cloud, digital, and what are they looking to use all this for? For process optimization, right? For increasing the efficiency of the systems, right? And this particular thing is really slated to increase. Okay. Okay, so I'll go further from here, and let's talk more about the consultant's point of view, right? So what is that you need to really work and see? And I'll try to take an example which can be very close to your heart. Now, since all of you come from academia, you understand the pain points of academic system, right? Examination can be one pain point, right? Maintaining attendance of students can be another pain point, right? Now, who is the consumer of this result? The consumer of this result is maybe the registrar, or maybe the people who are managing your examination system, your controller of examination and all, right? So these are your personas. These are the people whom you are catering to. So as a consultant, what you need to do is you need to drive conversation with these people. Right? These are your clients, and you have to understand that what is their interest area. Where are they actually facing the challenge? Where are they actually facing the problem? Right? And once you get a hang of their overall challenges, right, the business environment and the challenges, that is when you basically put your knowledge or your your innovation or your innovative ideas into creating a solution that can match their requirements, that can match their issues, that can actually provide you with some goals, which can increase the efficiency of the overall system, right? So this is what, right? So you need to develop that overall broad scope of things, where you actually listen to your client, you listen to this pain points, and then you devise a solution around, with your whatever capabilities and solutions that you bring to the table, right? Because as a researcher, you may have some certain capabilities in some niche areas, right? So few of you may be into manufacturing research, maybe a couple of you may be into IoT based research, somebody might be into machine learning, so these are your strengths, these are the capabilities that you have developed, right? So this is what you actually include in the offering, so that you iron out the pain points of the client, right? Typically the consultant is supposed to provide an expert professional advice, right? That's first thing, right? Which should be aimed towards a problem solving approach for the client problems, right? And most of the time the client does not know his problem, right? We see a lot of such stories where client does not understand where is the problem in the overall scenario. So in such a case, the role of consultant is more to identify and investigate, the overall how the process is done, what's the SOPs being followed, what are the markets, what are the various procedures and methods which are implemented in the client process, right? So consultant has to get into all of that, has to ingest all that information, and once they are able to ingest that information, they basically sort of create a roadmap and recommendation for the client, so that he can improve the process overall, right? What you do is, once you have all these recommendations in place, you discuss that as a blueprint with the client, and then you sort of identify the most important of those action items which you really need to take, right? Once you're able to take that, then you agree upon a SOW, a scope of work, right? The scope of work is a document which is basically agreed upon between the consultant and the client, that what the client will actually wants, and what the consultant is looking to offer to him, right? So that sort of marriage is between the document is the scope of work document, right? It basically gives the client a perspective of what problems are being going to be solved, what are the outcomes that he can expect. And from a consultant's point of view, the scope of work basically tells, these ABCD are the problems, this XYZ are the solution for this ABCD, and then what are the milestones that I have to actually showcase to the client in order to complete the project, right? So after process X is changed, his output will increase 2 times, right? After process B is complete, the customer satisfaction will change maybe 10 times, something like that, right? So those tangible outcomes have to be weaved into that, right? So let's say, if I am a client and I have to hire a consultant, what are the factors that I actually look for from a consultant's point of view? uh, Typically when you hire somebody, right, even if when you're hiring a maid, or for a house help, you try to look for some attributes in that person, right? So same as with the consultant, right? So when a client is going to pay you for something, before paying something, he will definitely want to understand, right? Do you really qualify for that, or do you really have, experience, or you have exposure to what he is actually looking for? So typically the factors that a client looks while hiring a consultant is, a few of them are mentioned here. Again, this is just an indicative list. It's not exhaustive list, guys, right? One is a very important track record, right? Now yesterday only, right, I was trying to, we were working with somebody, and we were trying to interview him for impaneling him as a partner, right? Now what we really need to understand is, has this company been associated with academic institutions earlier? If yes, what was their reputation? Were they charged for some fraud, for some forgery? Were they into something like that? uh, are their balance sheets clean? Do they really pay the people the way they are claiming them to be, right? So you basically evaluate all of that. So transparency, track record, fairness, this is something which is very important. Integrity, which is something very important, right? Next, something then you basically focus upon the quality of service that the particular consultant is giving you. There's so many consultants which are very good, but then they may not be professional, right? So you really want to actually try to pick up the best for your business, right? So you try to see who is more competent, as well as who is more qualified, and which can give you a better efficiency, right? So all that amount of uh, evaluation has to go in when a particular client looks for a consultant. So when you as an academician is building yourself as a consultant, you really need to take these things into account, right? Really need to factor all these things, because anybody, when you're putting up a proposal, and when the client is evaluating your proposal, what they will evaluate for is these are those parameters, right? So you should definitely understand, the shoe that the client is putting his feet into, right? So that will give you a better perspective about his thought process. Usually, whatever we work with a client, right? There are contracts for consulting services, which are prepared, as I was telling earlier as well. Uh, this is scope of work document is basically a property which belongs to the client. This is the framework under which he will evaluate you. This is the framework that you have to deliver. This is basically a proof of truth which tells the client, this is what is expected, this is what is supposed to be done. And it also talks about if there is any future scope of work, right? Or where do you actually stop, whatever restrictions, whatever clauses which are there. Why, if a certain thing is not being able to be completed, why was that not will not be being completed, right? What are the factors contributing to that? So all of that actually gets into that contract, right? And transfer of knowledge is or a knowledge transfer, KT, is really a very important part of the overall consultancy document, right? Whether you want to train the staff of the client, or you want to actually give him some replicable solution which they can do independently, maybe like a computer based tutorial, CBT, or something like that, right? So all of that actually is a part of the overall consultancy contract, right? And when you actually do that knowledge transfer, right, it's really important that you should be knowing about uh, what is the overall content to be transferred, right? There is a clear documentation which was basically maintained, which talks about these documents will be maintained in the common repository. This is a document which is to be handed over to the team, the management team. This has to be documented. What is the organizational level of hierarchy in the client organization? Whom are you talking to? What is the flow of information, right? So for example, you may be giving 100 pages of document to the manager, right? But then that all 100 pages does not go to the people in the shop floor, right? Maybe only 20 pages which are relevant and skimmed from those 100 pages may actually go to those workers, which makes sense. So all that information flow has to be governed, and which is again a part of this overall thing, right? The consultancy contract, right? What is the extent of the assignment? Again, the limitations, or the outcome. It has to be clearly narrated there. What will be the methods which will be used for moving up information between these multiple stakeholders, right? Whether you are going to do a on-the-job training, or you're going to do a demo for them, or you are going to do a training agreement with them, or you are going to do a standalone training thing for them, or you would like to actually do you will give them a simulated environment to do this, right? So all of that is actually maintained in that consultancy contract, and all of this basically governs the underlying tenets. What are the underlying tenets is, have you identified the problem, have you detailed the problem, have you set the nature of whatever has to be given, what are the goals that you're looking to achieve out of it, and what is the extent of the assignment, right? So all these things put together form the basis of the knowledge transfer, which are basically tabulated in the consultancy contract. As I was talking earlier about this training piece, because this is really important, right? Many a time the companies really falter at this stage. Now, why do they actually falter is, let's say you have trained a manager with something, right? Let's say you are a consultant for a business process change, and you have passed on, or you've done a KT for the manager. But the moment you have done that, it's always possible the manager may move up to the organization. So what it means is, all the effort that you have put into, in training, grooming a manager, or maybe, a team of 2 people, I'm talking about a small team there. they've all gone in waste because the person has moved out of the organization, which is pretty natural, right? It keeps happening all the time. People go out for better opportunities. People keep moving between organizations, right? But then from a consultant's point of view, this is not a scalable approach. The client will expect you to train the new incumbent, whosoever has come in place of the previous manager, right? But then if you keep doing that again and again, for the same set of customer, how are you going to scale up, right? And this is a never-ending loop, right? This is basically a vicious circle, because you have to take care of the customer expectations, client satisfaction, and at the same time you have to scale out as well, right? When you say I'm done with this consultancy, you need to move out of this to cater to maybe some other client, right? So hence it's really important that you form a strategy around that. This KT is really done at multiple levels, or there are backups in the system of the client who can actually take up the role in case the primary stakeholder moves. That's why whenever we do a consultancy, we talk about stakeholders, primary stakeholders, secondary stakeholders. So when you bring them to table, you just don't bring only the primary stakeholders, you also bring the secondary stakeholders to the table. Coming here, I really want to talk to you about something which is very important. I'm not sure if you heard about that, but then and this is one aspect which can be leveraged anywhere and everywhere. Now this is this approach called design thinking, which people usually take up, right? Now, since I'm not doing a poll here, so I don't know if how many of you know what a design thinking is, but then I'm just going to quickly talk about what a design thinking approach typically is, right? So when you actually see a problem can look like multifaceted. Means, so let's say this, I'll go back to the same example of this process plant. So when you are trying to assess the problem, or you're trying to assess what you can do or what you can propose to the client, you're doing a feasibility study. What it comes out is you're able to figure out some 20 things that should be changed in the plant, right, in order to achieve what you're looking to achieve. But you know what? It may not be possible to achieve or to change all those 20 things in one go, right? Because too much of you can't boil the ocean, right? You can't change so many things that it becomes out of hand. The overall change spirals out of hand, and it's difficult to contain. Now, which ones do you change? Now you have a list of 20 things that you should be doing in order to change a process and to obtain better outcomes. So that's where you do something called as a design thinking process. Okay, the design thinking process is done to identify something called as a MVP, most viable product. Okay, now out of those 20 things, which are the most important 5 things which will make the most impact, which will actually change most of what you are looking to achieve? So let's say if you're 20 things you are looking to achieve 100% efficiency, which are those big 5 things which can obtain by changing those 5, by you can obtain 60%, 70%, 50%, 70, 80% of overall objectives. So try to understand the scenario. You are only changing 5, but then you are making almost 60% change of the 100% that you are planning to. And changing 5 is very permissive, very easy to manage compared to managing 20 things at one go, right? So this process of identifying this MVP can be easily done by something called as design thinking. Now, how do we do design thinking, right? So consultancy has a very important component of design thinking, because you need to bring everybody to the table, all the stakeholders to the table. So normally when you propose a new solution, based upon your assumptions, okay? But then that may not be the best suited approach. Why? Because ultimately it is the end user which has to use your product or your project or whatever proposed changes that you're proposing. Unless he is a part of what you are changing, he has a buy-in of what you are trying to do, your proposed solution may not fly. It may not give you desired results, right? So that's where design thinking, in the process of design thinking, you bring everybody to the table, right? Who is this everybody? It can be the shop floor owner, that is the supervisors. It can be the workers. It can be the management. It has to be everybody. So you bring all these people, or rather the representatives of all these people to the table, and then you brainstorm. What do you brainstorm? That these are the 20 things which can make this product 100% more efficient. But then, we want to identify those 5 things, those big 5 things, which can make the most impact of this 100%, right? Who can tell you those 4 or 5 big things? The people who are part of that process are more suited to tell you that. And when you do that, you make these people part of your decision making process, which is really important, right? So if a consultant is able to bring the stakeholders into the decision making process, so when you roll out the solution automatically gets accepted. Otherwise, it is always a challenge, when you change a certain process. I'll give you an example from my experience. Long years back, I was working in an institution, and I was actually working in a computer science department as a lecturer back then, and I was also system administrator, system manager for the labs, right? So when you actually come to the labs, right, the basic problem often students and faculties complain is these computer systems are very outdated, right? These were bought some 5 years back, 7 years back. They don't even run the new software these days. Very slow. Students are not able to work. This is a common problem that you see, that you hear, right? Now, computers or computing has typically 2 dimensions. One is thick client computers. The other is thin client computers. So those of you who are not from computer background, let me quickly explain to you the difference between the two, and then I'll go further with this example. So thick client computers are the ones which you normally use. The computer which has a CPU, which has a hard disk, which has a monitor, right, of its own, and it has operating system of its own, and so forth. That's a thick client. So each machine has its own CPU, each machine has its own hard disk, each machine has its own monitor, each machine has its own processing unit. So that is all those laptops, all those desktops that you're using are thick clients. There is another category of machines called thin clients. Okay, the thin clients, there is a monitor, there is a keyboard, there's a mouse, but then the CPU actually has only very few things. What are those few things? The CPU only has a ROM, okay, has a flashable ROM, EPROM, and it has only certain amount of very small compute. So it does not have a hard disk. It does not have anything else on its of its own in the CPU. Now, okay, what sort of computer is this? If it does not have a hard disk, it does not have a CPU and all that. Okay, now let me explain. The thin client computers are basically operated in a client server model. So there is a server, a strong server, which basically has a strong computation power, right? Like a titanium sort of a processor. It has a huge memory, not like 8 GB and all. Maybe it might have even a 32 GB, 64 GB like of memory. And it has a good hard disk, big hard disk, because it has to maybe provide for storage for maybe all the 60 computers in the lab. Let's say this lab is of 60 computers, 60 thin clients, right? What it means is those 60 thin clients who do not have a processor, who do not have a hard disk of their own, are basically dependent on the hard disk and the processor of the server, right? Okay. Now the thin clients, since they do not have a hard disk, so they do not even have an operating system of their own, right? The entire operating system is residing on the server. So thin clients is only like a dumb terminal, which basically provides user with the interface, and the entire computing is done on the centralized server. Entire storage is done on the centralized server. Now try and see the difference, right? Thick clients, everything is within the computer. Thin clients, nothing is on the computer, everything is on the server. Now just assume every 2 years when the hardware changes in a thick client lab of 60 computers, all the computers actually are going to become obsolete or going to become old. Why? Because you can't keep on buying computers every 2 years, right? All those 60 computers in a lab. But in a thin client's case, even if the main computer, that's the server, is even becoming obsolete, all that you have to do is you only need to replace one machine, one server, or maybe if not replace, add more computing power, add more memory, add more hard disk to it, and that's it. Number one. Number two, in a thick client scenario, you have to buy 60 licenses for all the 60 computers for operating system, right? But which, each license will, let's say, cost 10,000. 60 computers will cost 60 into 10,000. But then with the thin client computers, you only need to have one server license on the server. And for all the other 60 machines, you only need to have something called as TSCALs, terminal services. which is hardly like 200-300 rupees per license, right? So see the difference, right? Now, as a system administrator, I was tasked with that the institution wants to replace their thick clients with thin clients, and now you understand the different the problem here, right? Now, when you actually tell a particular lab in charge that please, I'm going to replace these thick clients with thin clients, the first thing that he comes and says is, these computers don't have any memory, right? They take a lot of they don't have any computation of their own, right? How will I manage with the lab of 60 students? So that's actually a major task of bringing that change management is actually a huge task from a consultant's point of view. So if you take all these stakeholders into your discussion while you are proposing a change, the life of the consultant becomes a lot more easier, is what I was actually coming from. So what I should have done at that point in time, maybe when I was making those changes in the system, I should have roped in all those faculties who do labs, and I should have actually taken their inputs, that what is the type, what is the how long is the program that you normally write, how much computation does it takes, how much compiling time does it takes, 1 minute, 2 minutes, and all those typical nitty-gritties. And if I would have included all of that into my overall business proposal, these people, these stakeholders would have a natural buy-in to whatever changes I'm trying to make, because they would have seen the value into what I'm trying to propose. Okay, so this is what basically all about, right? How do we do our knowledge transfer? How we actually bring all these stakeholders to the table? What design thinking is? So design thinking really makes the tasks very easier from a user's point of view, right? Okay, so let me go further and let me talk about the various types of enablements that we do for the client, right? So one of them is the on-the-job training, right? We basically offer the client staff the training on based upon the scope of work, right? And there would be some training associated with some tangible outcomes, right? So you do a training, then you basically provide them with some evaluation mechanism, right? There should be some goals to be achieved, right? This training can be part-time, full-time, depending upon what is the agreement with the client that you have made. There has to be some organizational arrangements, and everything has to be mapped with some outcome. There has to be some expected results out of this, right? One expected result can be, once the training is done, the client's staff will take over the entire process, right? So you will no longer be hand holding them. You will no longer be present to do the activities like that. A couple of things to really ponder over here is, normally when we train somebody, we assume that this particular person has a certain level of knowledge. That's the first thing that we really make a wrong assumption towards. We should really allocate enough an amount of time, enough amount of resources, because if you train the resources in depth, as a consultant, your role is done. These people will really take it further from there. You need not stay involved in that, right? So it's really important to allocate enough number of financial and resources from a times point of view as well, right? There has to be a proper documentation of the evaluation reports that you commit, that basically you have created, right? And all of this training should be dovetailed into some sort of evaluation process, and of that evaluation process, the client should also be a party to it, so that client is continuously knowing that his staff is really getting trained on a certain aspect of whatever you are proposing to do, right? Yeah, so this is another type of training where we basically try to identify one particular problem area in the staff of the client, and then we try to actually strengthen that particular area, whether it's operations, whether it's management of infrastructure or utilities or something like that, right? Now, this can really be compensated in multiple ways, like giving them some short courses, giving them some short assignments, giving them some study tools, giving them some evaluation tools, wherein they basically see others and how the others are doing, and based upon that they basically come back and they learn from those processes and try to adopt those processes, right? So there are multiple mechanisms to do that, these standalone training, right? Yeah, so this is just about how do you administer this. This happens a lot into academic institutions, where there are short-term, long-term courses. Faculties are sent on a study tour. They are sent on some deputations to various universities, to various industry, so that they can study the processes there and come back and they can teach the students with the new knowledge that they bring in, or maybe they can improve the research methodology, what they see from the industry, how they're doing it there, right? So be it molecular biology, be it macrobiology, be it computer science, right? So all those learnings that they see from the industry, they bring them back to the company, and then they, sort of adopt it there. Another approach is basically twinning. Here, you have some arrangement between the country and the entity which is involved in that, in the supplier country, right? Again, knowledge transfer, KT, and the improvement of capacity is something which is very important, and it's a benchmark which is achieved through the twinning arrangements, right? Uh, uh, so I'll basically just skip through to this part. Maybe you can just go through that. I can share this later on as well, right? This is important, right? So you need to have a TOR between, whenever you're trying to create a proposal, right? So your terms of reference are basically developed by the client, which is like a guiding force when you are trying to write something about the project, right? So reference basically can be about the background of the project, what has been the process so far, what are you trying, what are the main features of the project, what is the overall purpose of it, right? And then, as I was trying to tell you earlier also, the overall objective is basically to identify the scope of work, right? That's first and foremost thing, which again is, under the terms of reference. Then second is you need to have a transfer of knowledge, right? The KT I was talking to you about, which is, an integral part of the overall consultancy thing. Then what are the various reports that are going to be coming out of this overall engagement? What is the schedule of deliveries, right? So there has to be some tangible outcomes based upon the scope of work that you have decided on. It can be, the change of process, it can be the amount of increase in efficiency, it can be the amount of increase in customer satisfaction, it can be the reduction on the overall cycle time, it can be anything, right? So all that actually has to be, that's a deliverable that has to be part of the scope of work, and that has to be tied to tangible outcomes, right? Then what are the various information flow happening between multiple stakeholders in the overall system, right? So that sort of low data, that sort of personnel, that sort of facilities that has to be given by the by the client to the consultant, and vice versa. So once the project is over, what is that the consultant is handing over back to the client, right? So you indicate all those roles and responsibilities, and you actually give the timing, and you give the stakeholders criteria, like who is going to do what in this overall scheme of things. This is just a generic slide which talks about cost and budget, right? So I'm sure most of you are familiar, right? So whenever you're doing a project, you really need to understand who will be the people who are working on this project. So their remuneration has to be taken in consideration. What are the various allowances? What are the various office things that you need, right? Whether you need a internet, whether you need a transport thing, or whether you need a communications systems, whether you need to travel somewhere, all of that has to be built into the overall cost of the project, right? And then you need to have some 5% inflation overheads, which will be covering your contingencies of the overall system, right? And this cost estimate has to be made on a basis of per month basis, recurring expenses, one-time expenses, and so on and so forth. So it can be capex as well as opex. It can be clubbed into two categories, right? Capital expenditure, like one-time expenses, in case you're creating an infrastructure, in case you're buying something, some hardware, some software, that can be a one-time expenditure, or you're creating an infrastructure, that can be a part of the capex, right? And then all the remuneration which you're going to pay, all the supplies that you're going to use, your transportation, your people who are working for you, all of those actually may get into your OPEX, the operational expenses category, right? Two major rules, right? While you're trying to win a consultancy job, one is the proposal. You need to actually write a project proposal for it to be accepted. The problem is, in case you're getting somebody else to write it, or maybe you're trying to replicate it from somewhere else, it may not be able to actually win the job for you. I'm sure when we were growing up, we were told that for each opportunity, for each job application, one should rewrite the profile, one should rewrite your resumes. Why? Because requirement of each job is unique to the other job, right? So when you're applying for a job, you should target, your resume should actually cater to the requirements of that job, not the previous jobs, right? Hence, that sort of customization is really important in case you really want to succeed. So similarly, in case you want to get a consultancy really job, you really have to actually write a proposal for that particular client, understanding his pain points, understanding his market needs, understanding the scope of market that he's catering to, and all that. And second is, in case you're not able to write a winning, proposal in the first go, maybe you can keep on trying, right? Because the more you try, the more perfect you get into, writing of a thing, right? Before I actually finish, right, I'll basically, go back to my first slide, and I told you, right, there is a link there, and I want to talk to you about that link as well, right? Okay, so I'll quickly, come out of my presentation, and I'm actually gonna go to this link. So on this slide, I have given you 3 links, right? I am going to talk about these 2 links, ibm.biz/academic. This is one link, and then this is the second link, guys. Okay. So let me quickly take you through this link, okay? And I'm just copy pasting this link as well. You can take a snapshot. You can take a quick photo from your camera, and maybe you can refer it to it later as well, right? So I'm going to my browser, and I'm actually going to a site called IBM Academic Initiative. Now, this is a one-stop learning platform for most of your needs, guys. Let me explain to you how. Whether you are into computer science, IT, or you are into any engineering branch, okay? So that's what I'm trying to explain to you. You may be from a computer science background, or you may not be from a computer science background. So let me say, in case you are from a computer science background, number one, then you have a lot of learning content and a lot of software which are available from here for free. We will show that to you across different technologies, be it cloud, data science, security, quantum computing, blockchain, Watson, all of them, right? So all of these areas come with, I'll show you how the content is arranged here, right? So all of these areas come with a lot of courseware, right? Whether you want to learn machine learning, or you want to learn cloud, or you want to learn blockchain, there are, courseware which you can freely download. You can not just, you can download, you can even let your students to download, and you can use them for teaching as well. Then second is, there are a lot of software, which are made available on this site, which are downloadable for free. There is no charges associated, and they are proper licenses, be it SPSS Modeler Premium, be it Cognos Analytics, be it iLog, Cplex, or be it Watson Studio. So whatever sort of project you want to do, even if it is a typical research for maybe a mechanical person, or maybe instrumentation, or a chemical guy, SPSS Modeler is something which most of us use, right? So you can download a free licensed copy both for Windows and Macintosh machines from here without any cost here. Not just that, you also get a lot of lab exercises which will help you to learn this, right? As I was telling you, the courseware. For people who are looking to have data sets and all, right, which you normally don't find, there is a data asset exchange also available from where you can find free and open source data sets under open data license. So this is also something which might be of interest to you. For people who are not into, let's say, computer science, and who are into other technology domains, all of us really need to, would actually learn maybe software engineering, or maybe system lifecycle at some point in time, right? So for that, there are again a lot of software available, like Doors, like Rhapsody, right? Like RQA, Rational Quality Assurance, right? All of them are actually made available from here. These are all free downloads, guys. There is no charges to this portal. Everything is absolutely free. Learning material is free. The course material is free. There are also digital badges which are available for free. You don't have to pay for that, any of it. All that you need to do is, you need to actually register on this portal with an institutional email ID. Okay, you have to use an institutional email ID. You can't use a Gmail or a Hotmail mail ID to register here. So for example, if I belong to, say, let's say MIT college, then my email ID should be money@mit.org.edu or something like that, right? So I need to be using my institutional email ID, and this is open to both faculty and students, either of them. Only thing that is needed is institutional email ID. So in case you do not have an institutional email ID, you can ask your college to give you one. And second thing is, once those of you who have institutional email IDs, your college may not, this is a global program, guys, so your college may not be part of this program, right? So let me give you an example. So let's say I'm part of this college, mit.org, let's say, for example, and I'm saying submit. I want to register. So this comes back and says your college institution is not part of academic initiative program, right? And it says that you have to come back and you have to register. Now, I'm basically giving you a link here. The second link that I was talking to you about. This is basically a Google form. This is a Google form. In case your college is not listed here, just fill this form here, right? Your college name, your institutional email ID, and your college website. Only three things is needed, nothing else is needed. Just submit it here. And we will get the college added to this portal for getting you access to academic initiative program. And we will send you a mail about how to register. In case your college is already enrolled, there are so many colleges which are already enrolled, right? So let's say let's say I have this college, right? So I belong to this college and this is my mail domain, right? So the moment I try to register, it will automatically come back and say, yes, your college is already registered here. Just complete the registration, whether you're faculty or a staff or a student. You just follow this up, you agree to this, and then I can download all these software. Not just you can download, you can even ask your students to download these software and register here, and a lot of courseware is also available. So this is where I stop, guys, and I'm now open to all the questions that you may have. Okay. I'll stop presenting and I'm good to take questions now.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for the lovely session. Now I will ask questions, sir, on the behalf of everyone. Okay, sir.
Okay, I'm basically copying these two links on the chat in case anybody was interested in, and you can actually do that. Okay, yeah, sir. Please go ahead, ma'am.
The very first question is, sir, how can I start an R&D after research? How difficult would that be?
Sorry, ma'am, can you repeat that?
Yeah, sure. How can I start an R&D after my research? How difficult would that be?
Okay, so this is actually a good question, and it really requires a lot of elaborate work to be put into. So let me give you an example in a very broad and in a very different manner. Let's say it's the winter is around the corner, guys, okay, and you are looking to buy a room heater for yourself, right? These are those convection heaters which come these days. Now, when you're going to buy this convection heater, these oil-filled radiators which come these days, which are very quick to warm the room and they're child safe and all that. Now, how do you actually make a decision to buy? Which one do you buy, right? Now, when you are actually working, in R&D and you're looking to work in R&D and you're trying to develop your profile as a consultant, why would anybody hire you, right? How do anybody know that you could be hired? The first thing is you need to build a profile for yourself. You need to develop an eminence for yourself. For example, there are hundreds of brands which sell those oil-filled radiators, okay, the room heaters. But normally you will look for a branded company like Havells, like Murphy Richards, or maybe like Bajaj, or maybe like that, right? And there may be so many other tens of brands which are like those. You don't know about the quality of those, but then there are so many brands which are there, right? But then you will not put your faith into that. You will basically put your faith into the brands which carry some eminence. So as an R&D person, the first thing that you should be doing is you should be building a brand for yourself. You should be building an eminence for yourself. Now, how do you build your eminence? A lot of ways. One is whatever you are doing, whatever you are reading, whatever you are publishing, please have a positive social footprint. Put yourself on LinkedIn, put yourself on Facebook, put yourself on Twitter. Try to talk about what you're looking to do. Normally today, when I hire somebody, I basically look for his online footprint. Is this person really into this technology? Is this person really into visual analytics? Is this what sort of work has he done? Whatever programming or whatever code you have done, try to maintain a GitHub repository for that. Now, these are the places which people look for when they're trying to ascertain that you are really into this technology domain. If I find all of these things, I am assured, yes, that this person is into really, this particular research and development area. So try to build a brand for yourself. The more you put more efforts into this, and this has to be done yourself. Nobody can do it for you, right? If your college would try to do it, they'll not be able to do it for yourself, right? Try to have your own website, right? Try to put your publications there. Try to put whatever work you're doing. Even your student assignments can be put in there, right? What you're trying to give to them, right? Everything is possible. That's first thing to do. Second thing is, please have a healthy research pipeline, right? The more diverse projects that you work on, the more they add to the overall, your being more agile in terms of things. We do not talk about people who are only in one area today, guys. People look for resources who are having diverse skills. Even when you are getting recruited in a college, if you say I only teach one subject, let's say algorithms, right? So maybe the management may not be interested in just hiring you for algorithms, unless you say yes, I teach algorithms and I can also teach architecture, I can also teach AI, and then they become interested into it, right? So please try to be more diverse, try to be more cross disciplinary as you are doing your work. That will really establish a better footprint for you. Ma'am, back to you.
Thank you, sir. Next question is how to generate consultancy opportunity.
Yeah, so this is the most difficult thing to do, right? So as I said, two ways, right? Two ways. One is either you make yourself so popular in a field that people come to you for your help, right? How will that happen? That will happen when you have a very strong social footprint. People get to know that okay, this is blockchain. Okay, in blockchain there are only 20 people in India whom I should be going out to, and you are one of those 20. That's one way of doing it. So you build your eminence in that area so that people come to you rather than you going to people, right? That's first thing, which is the most ideal thing to do, and it takes some time before you can actually come to that stage. Second thing, please keep looking out for all these, the way I was telling you about the opportunities, right? Where are the areas that people are looking for help in? What are those areas? If you know those areas and you have developed your skills in those areas, people will automatically come to you. Why? Let me give you an example. RPA. uh, in academic fraternity, I think only maybe 100 people or 200 people or 500 people will be knowing about what is RPA, right? And leave alone teaching, they will just be knowing about RPA. The moment you develop your skills in RPA, and people get to know that you know about RPA through programs, through your tweets, through your social media posts and all, and maybe your whatever work you're doing, some research work, they will automatically come to you when they need somebody, a resource on RPA, right? Because you are only few of those who knows RPA, right? So that's again another way of actually approaching and getting some job. And third, and the most hard way of doing things is keep looking out for opportunities which are available, in various portals and platforms. There are so many platforms which basically publish the requirements for consultants, right? So consultant needed for A area, for B area, and so on. So you can always go back and check those areas and then align yourselves with those.
Thank you, sir. And the next question is how to develop a partnership between HAIs and industries in terms of a research ecosystem. May I repeat?
Yeah, please do. The voice got breaking up.
How to develop a partnership between HEIs and industries in terms of a research ecosystem.
So let's try to understand the same. I'll come back to the same point again, right? If you have to decide a tutor for your child, let's say, right? How will you decide a tutor for a child? You will not just simply go and pick anybody and say, Mr. Money, can you teach my child, right? Can you teach my child science, right? Mr. Money may not be knowing even about science, or he may not be even so well conversant with science of today, right? Because he studied science 30 years back. So what do? You normally basically, look for people who are good with that subject, right? And so you reach out to people who are good with that subject. Same goes when you're looking to develop an ecosystem of some people to do a joint research. When should I try to do a research with maybe Rubika ma'am, right? Once I find that the area that she is doing research is of interest to me, right? Right. So let's say my research interest is blockchain. Now, unless Rubika is interested into cryptocurrencies or cryptography or distributed systems, and she is good at that, unless she is good with that, why should I join forces with her? Why should I connect with her, right? Because she will be of, which she may not be of use to me, right? So to actually create healthy research partnerships, you need to develop some competency first. Once you have a competency, then you actually connect back to the industry, and then you see where are the synergies. For example, IBM would like to do a lot of joint research in quantum today, right? But then do you know quantum? And if you know quantum, then you are more than welcome to come join us. We'll be more than happy to work together, right? Similarly, IBM is today very keen to work or to do joint research on cognitive. But do you know cognitive? And if you know cognitive, then we are more than happy, because that's where we can join and work constructively, right? Now, it cannot be like, IBM is doing some research work in some X area, and you connect with IBM to learn that. That way, we are not leveraging each other. That way, we are leaning on one another, which is not actually a healthy research proposition, right? So once you have developed a competency, for example, IBM also goes to a lot of academia and academic institutes. So we also try and connect with a lot of academic institutes, who have competencies in certain area. So I know X Institute, which has researchers in security. So we go and we connect with them, and we take help with them, and we work together to do joint research in that area. Same is with quantum. Same is with other technologies. So industry is also looking for people from academia with whom we can collaborate. But we need to have those skills, those competencies in those places where we can really identify and do some joint work together.
Thank you, sir. You explained it so clearly. Sir, next question is it possible to take any specific consultancy project as topic for doctorate without publication, as publication is prohibited in consultancy projects?
Yeah, because the IP of the consultancy project belongs to the client. It doesn't belongs to you, right? So it will not make sense. And then whatever research you want to do actually is your, IP, or it belongs to you, because you have to publish it. Unless you own it, you can't publish it, right? So it is not advisable to basically club the two. It's not as advisable. But post research, yes, you can actually get into that. But when you're trying to do a research and then you want to publish yourself, then it may not be a good choice to actually go towards the consultancy route, because it will not yield the academic benefit that you're looking to do from your work.
Okay, thank you, sir. One more question is from our participant. Does the IPM resource links also contain any plagiarism check softwares useful
No,
for
there
the
is
research, sir?
there is no plagiarism check software on IBM tools.
Okay.
But at the same time, I can tell you one thing.
Yeah.
There is a service called Watson Explorer, which is available on IBM Cloud. So normally, when you do a research, you try to search for a lot of, you do a Google search, or you look to, find right content for your research, right? Now, when you do a Google search, you basically get hundreds and thousands of content. Now, which is the right content for you? It's really a huge, humongous task to basically identify the right content, right? So this particular service which I'm talking about is a cognitive search engine. It basically gives you only the relevant or the best fit content with what topic that you're searching. So you don't have to, actually skim through the entire web pages when you're doing it. This topic, the website, the Watson service gives you the exact link which matches to the research topic that you're looking to do, without much of a skimming that way.
Okay, thank you, sir. Sir, one more question is, when tried to register IBM Academia, it not allowed as a student, telling university staff or faculty need to fill the form. Please advise.
So I am not sure why you are seeing this, but then let me, if you have seen the form there, you can just, there is a drop down in the list which basically talks about whether you are faculty or or a student, or maybe a staff, doesn't matter. You can simply, in case your college is not registered, then you should actually fill the second link that I've given you. It's a bit.ly link which I've given you. Please fill the details there. We'll get the college registered for the access. Once you have the access, then it doesn't matter whether you're a student or a faculty or a staff, anybody can actually register there and get access to all the software and courseware available.
Okay, thank you, sir. Sir, one more question. Do you really think Bluemix is good enough for services as compared to Azure or Google Cloud? How it distinct?
So, well, there is no more Bluemix as of now. IBM Cloud is one single entity which basically comprises of infrastructure as a services, which was earlier called software, the company we acquired, and Bluemix, which got launched as platform as a service, is now part of IBM Cloud. So everything today is IBM Cloud. There is no Bluemix as such. Okay, now coming back to the question that the platform as a service offerings or infrastructure as a service offerings, are they as good enough compared to Azure or a Google? How distinct? So it all depends upon what sort of requirement do you have. The typical difference from a user point of view is all these cloud platforms give you typical t-shirt sizes, for example, a small, medium, large, right? When you are subscribing to a particular infrastructure service, IBM Cloud provides you a complete customization to the core. So you can start with a 1 GB of a RAM to whatever type of RAM that you want for your machine from an infrastructure point of view. Similarly, when you talk about from a platform services point of view, each platform has their own unique offerings, right? For example, IBM is really sought after for Watson services that IBM provides, right? Google Cloud has a few of its own, which people really go and leverage Google Cloud. So that's the beauty of cloud computing. You can leverage the best of all the worlds. So you can use something from IBM Cloud, you can use something from Google Cloud, you can use something from Azure, and you can use all of that thing in a single solution. So that's the beauty. You basically get the best of all the worlds when you're talking about a cloud-based solutions.
Thank you, sir. One more last question is there any work going on nature-inspired optimization algorithm in IBM?
Yeah, definitely. A lot of them, right? Is why I understand where you're coming from. Yes, there is a lot of work going on in research labs in those optimization algorithms, which are nature inspired. So all those ant colony, all of those optimization algorithms are really, it's core to what we are working in a lot of ways. You're right. I hope that answers the questions.
Yeah, surely. Thank you so much.
May I ask one
Now,
question?
thanks. Nasa, is anyone there?
Yeah, Rubika, I want to ask
Rubika
you.
ma'am. Rubika ma'am, if
Yes,
anyone
yes,
wants to
please,
interact with
Paramjit.
sir, you can permit if
Okay,
anyone want to if
okay,
anyone
ma'am.
want
Okay, sir.
to.
Thank you.
Yes, may I ask something?
Please, ma'am.
Yeah. Sir, you have told that there is some work going on nature-inspired optimization algorithm in IBM. So if I want to contact those persons who are working on that, so what will be the procedure to contact them?
What is the motivation of contacting them, ma'am?
I am also working on it. I am working for my PhD.
So maybe, ma'am, what you can do is you can connect with me on LinkedIn, and maybe I'll give you the more correct link where you should be connecting to the right person. IBM is a huge organization, by the way, right? So within India itself, we're almost like 1.5 lakh people, right? So we'll have to identify who is the exact person that you should be connecting to in order to get your queries, right? So maybe you can connect with me on LinkedIn, and I can help you there.
Any other platform except LinkedIn?
Ma'am, that's the platform we all of us use, right, to connect and connect. Yeah.
Does anyone have any
Okay,
question?
anyone
You
else?
can directly ask to sir. Does anyone have any question? You can directly ask to Mani sir. If
Sir, I think anyone had question, they can definitely ask. I think we
okay,
can now for the session. Yeah. Thank
okay,
you, sir.
ma'am.
Thank you, Mani, sir. On the behalf of MMICGBM, I would like to thank our distinguished speaker, Dr. Mani Madhukar, for making an excellent presentation and making the session very meaningful and interesting. And I also extend my thanks to all the participants for attending our one-week orientation program. Now, I would like to request Dr. Dilip to take over the session for vote of thanks. Thank you so much. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, I am audible.
Yes, sir. You are
You are
very
very
well audible.
audible.
On behalf of MMICT and BM and the entire management, I, Dr. Dalip, feeling a very hearty gratitude to all the speakers for sharing their graceful words. I am thankful to all the participants to attend the one-week International Research Orientation Program in association with Elsewhere India and Rex Lab USA. I assure that the participant must have benefited by attending this event. I sincerely thank to our chief guest, Dr. Harish Kumar Sharma, Pro Vice Chancellor, Maharishi Markandeswar Deemed to be University, who honored this program with his inspirational thought. I am thankful to our respected principal, Dr. Smith Mittal, to organize this event for their unlimited support and encouragement. I am also thankful to our organizing team and other staff members. I once again thank everyone whose contribution has made this 1 week international research orientation program a great success. Thank you. So now there is an announcement regarding certificate. We will provide the certificate of this event within a week on your email. Thank you.
Thank you, Dilip sir. Now, I would like to request all my participants and our respected speaker to please switch on your cameras so that I can take screenshots. Thank you so much. Thank you all the participants. Thank you, Dr. Madhukar sir. Thank you so much for being there. Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dilip sir. Thank you, Rubika ma'am. Thank you, Nitika ma'am. Thank you, Ayushi ma'am. And thank you, Savita ma'am, for very
And thank
well
you, Kushal